We're joined now by Brandon Huffman, National Recruiting Editor for 24/7 Sports. Brandon, good morning.
How you doing, guys?
We're doing well. It's a big week for the Utes and Cougars, bringing in high-profile guys. Let's start with quarterback because it's football and quarterbacks mean so much. Ryder Lyons, a 5-star quarterback. Is he really going to BYU? He's visiting Oregon. He's cut some other people off the list. What do you think of Ryder, and what do you think the odds are he ends up in Provo?
I mean, I've said for 2 years that I think he's the best quarterback in the country. I know he's a top 5 quarterback nationally. He's the number 1 player in California. For my money, I will take him as the best quarterback in the country, and this is big. You know, it was essentially down to BYU, USC, and Oregon. His brother is at USC, and then he was supposed to take a visit there 2 weeks ago, canceled it, and there's talk it may happen in the fall because he's not enrolling until 2027. There's a little bit of flexibility, but I have maintained for a while this was a BYU-Oregon battle, and I have said more than anybody in the media, do not sleep and do not discount BYU's efforts with him. And now they get their shot. They get the last visit, and they got all the big guns visiting this weekend as well. So, you know, this could end up being the most significant recruit Kalani Sitake has ever gotten in his 10 years at BYU. So all eyes are on Provo, not just with BYU fans, but I would say college football fans in general are tracking this one.
If he chooses BYU, why do you think he would choose them?
I think there's a couple reasons in play. He really likes Aaron Roderick. He really likes the direction that BYU is going. I think he is seeing that, you know, after the 2024 season, when they got their feet under themselves and the way that they competed, you know, not just in the Big 12, but, you know, as a nationally ranked team throughout the year, that this is an offense. You know, Kalani's a defensive guy, and that's always a concern when you're a quarterback. If I go play for a defensive guy, is his focus going to be on winning the game with defense, or is he going to open up the offense? And I think this last year with Jake Retzlaff, a quarterback, they showed a penchant to, you know, be exciting on offense. And I think that really answered a lot of questions. And obviously, you know, having a guy like Zach Wilson go number 2 in the draft a few years ago, having a number of quarterbacks in recent years get drafted and get the opportunity in the NFL, that helps. But it's also the direction the program is trending up on a national scale. And I also think that, you know, given the fact that he is planning to serve a mission for a year, there's complete flexibility and openness from BYU. Oregon and USC are saying the same thing, but obviously BYU has a track record of being open to that and allowing for that and encouraging that. And so I think a lot of factors play into BYU being a very legitimate threat to Lansing.
Other schools that have been mentioned as finalists here, USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Ole Miss, are any of them really in the mix? Is it just Oregon and BYU? What are the odds they could get back in if they wanted to? What do you think?
Yeah, I think internally it's Oregon or BYU. I do think USC is still somewhat being considered just because of Walker being there. Obviously, Lincoln Riley's track record at quarterback development, quarterback draft picks. I mean, how many number 1 picks, how many Heisman Trophy winners has he developed in his time? USC does have a 2026 quarterback that, you know, that they were able to flip from Oregon, interestingly enough, and that's why Oregon has gone in. But with all these schools, it was a matter of what's their 2027 quarterback situation look like. And Ohio State's the only one that actually had a 2027 quarterback committed. So I think, you know, with an Ole Miss, obviously Lane Kiffin has a nice track record as well. Jackson Dart just became a first-rounder himself. So a lot of these schools have a chance, but I really think internally he has just been focusing on the 3 Western schools and has said for a while that those are the 3 that were for sure getting officials. He was letting Ohio State, Michigan, and Ole Miss make a push, but it really seems like it's been USC, BYU, and Oregon, and now really it seems like it's Oregon and BYU for him.
So much of college football has changed in recent times with the NIL, and then also, too, there's been a little bit of a division between the Big Ten, SEC, and the others. What do you think those things are playing into as far as factors for kids making their decisions?
I think those are something that fans manufacture as their need to kind of create drama from January 20th until kickoff in August. And, you know, fans have way more pride and division and rivalries with the conferences than the players do. I mean, if you need any more proof, then it's a fan-created narrative rather than a player-created narrative. Go look at the transfer portal every December or in April. Guys are leaving big schools to, you know, the SEC and Big. Go to the new Pac-12 schools. They don't care. They don't care about, what channel SEC games are all on or what games Big Ten is being played at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. They care about where do I have the best chance to get developed and where's the best NIL deal going to be and where's the best revenue sharing going to be. So I don't think that the conference divisions and, the divisiveness between the conferences is even on the radar for the recruits. It's all about the fans and their athletic directors of those schools who need to cry poverty when they have plenty of millions of dollars in their back pocket. It's something that we need to have for 8 months to keep the college football engagement there. But I don't think recruits give a flying flip about anything related to, you're in the Big Ten, you're in the SEC, you're in the Big 12, you're the ACC. If I can go play and I can get paid, that's where I'm going.
Felix Ojo, 5-star offensive tackle out of Texas, is supposed to be visiting Utah this weekend. Consensus top 10 pick. Great headlines around him. What do you think of him, and what do you think the odds are he ends up with the Utes?
I mean, he's a grown man. I saw him at the All-American Bowl. He was one of the rare juniors that was invited to play in the All-American Bowl back in January in San Antonio. And, when you spend the last 2 months going through mock drafts of the 2026 NFL draft, and you see not one but two potential offensive tackles from the University of Utah being projected as first-round draft picks, that right there is as good of a sales and recruiting pitch that Jim Harding and Kyle Whittingham could give to potential offensive tackle commits. I mean, there's a history of players getting developed at Utah, offensive linemen going early, getting drafted. But now to have two potential tackles being drafted in the first round, that shows you, A, those guys are getting developed, despite the fact that both were pretty elite prospects coming in. But B, what does that also tell me? That there's going to be a potential to play early in 2026 because they lose likely both of their tackles. So you can get a Felix Ojo to come in. And, Utah always gets one or two recruits to come in on a visit that you kind of think. I always go back. Now, granted, he was on the defense side of the ball, but I always remember the Jalen Johnson recruitment 10 years ago. And when you looked at the schools that he was looking at that point and kind of where they were at on the football kind of, pecking order, where Utah was still trying to get their legs under themselves in the Pac-12 at that point, and then Jalen Johnson goes there and flourishes to the point where he's one of the highest paid defensive backs now. They are always good for a recruitment like, why is Utah in it? And then, oh my gosh, Utah's going to land him. So I wouldn't ignore this one at all when you look at the tackle development and the potential for immediate vacancies next year. And, we can talk all we want about Ryder Lyons being a big one, but this is a sneaky big visit that Utah's hosting this weekend.
How much has the transfer portal impacted high school recruiting?
That's a great question because I see it every year. Oh, the portal is killing recruiting. It's not killing recruiting because guess what? You need players to come from somewhere. So those players that have gone into the portal, they played high school football. They got recruited. What it's doing is it's recalibrating the expectations of parents. No longer are you getting the kid who's the 25th player in a class getting an offer from his dream school in January or on the Tuesday before signing day in February. Now that kid's having to make a decision going into his senior year, probably by July or August, and maybe he's going to an FCS school and turning an FCS program almost into a quasi-JUCO program. So it's not affecting it so much that there's still schools that need bodies. It's just kind of recalibrating where players are signing on the front end. And then if those schools can maintain and retain those players over the course of those few years. But what the biggest thing is you're seeing classes being sewn up by probably mid-July. And I would say 90 to 95% of a recruiting class that won't sign until December is going to be locked in by July. And, it's almost like the senior year evaluation doesn't matter anymore for the Power 4 schools or even for some Group of 5 schools. And the calendar has moved the goalposts a little sooner. So players aren't getting chances to be that 25th guy that develops for 3 years. Now it's like, hey, I'm going to go play at an FCS school, get some film, and then, remarket myself in 2 years in the portal and potentially get a big payday.
Coaches may not stay put long enough for this to work, but it does seem in the same way that Utah, BYU, Oregon, USC, whoever can develop guys for the NFL, it does seem like they're MAC schools, FCS schools that the pitch could be, hey, come here, and in 2 years you will be playing in a power league, in a brand name school. You can't play right away there, but you can play right away here. Now, do coaches stay put long enough for that pitch to work, or coaches interested in making that work?
Jason Eck is the new head coach at New Mexico, and he was at Idaho for the previous 3 years. And he said last summer, and it was pretty enlightening, he said when they were recruiting players to Idaho, they did it with essentially the pitch of, hey, if you come here for 2 years, 3 years, do what we think you're capable of doing, by all means, go into the portal. Because if that means that you did what we expect you to do and your talent gets you on the field and gets you that film rather than going sitting on the bench, that's going to be better for you. But that also means that's good for our program, and we're going to have an opportunity in the playoffs. And Idaho went to the playoffs for 3 straight years. Jason Eck gets hired at a Mountain West school, and he parlayed, the success of those really good recruits that came there into turning around the Idaho program and a better job for him. I think Idaho had something like 15 players go into the portal upon Eck's departure and move up to FBS. So schools are not only, kind of recruiting that, but those coaches are almost using that to their own advantage where, hey, we're winning now. I'm developing these players. I'm signing these players. Now, if I'm a position coach at a school, I might get a better FBS job than an FCS school, or I might be a head coach at an FCS school, and now I'd be an FBS head coach in 2 or 3 years because of the players that I brought, and I'm going to bring a dozen of those players. We saw it with Stanford. Really, we saw it with Sacramento State when Troy Taylor was the head coach there. He parlayed that to the Stanford job, and then a bunch of his players ended up going to the portal. And Cam Scatterbo ended up being a star for Arizona State when he was a no-name recruit that Troy Taylor recruited for Sacramento State. So these schools are using it, especially the FCS schools and the lower G5 schools. They're using it to their advantage for a quick fix of making their program better, but also these coaches are using this as a resume builder.
Who's tearing it up and recruiting in the Big 12 then?
I would say Arizona State, and this is the thing where I've said this for years. You don't necessarily, and especially with the calendar being like it is, you don't see the bump in a successful turnaround season in that ensuing class. You see it in the following year when you now have the entire offseason to really market yourself. And Arizona State has a top 15 class right now. I think it's a top 2 class in the Big 12. They're still getting traction with some in-state kids, but Arizona State is now being looked at by kids in Texas, by kids in California. A lot of the kids outside of Arizona are wanting in at Arizona State. And then, we're used to this for Kansas. Kansas surprisingly has done well in football recruiting. And it's credit to Lance Leipold, who's done a really good job. But everybody takes a back seat to the deepest wallets, it seems like, this last offseason. And you can't mess with oil money. And apparently Texas Tech is just throwing money out to anybody. I mean, I don't even have kids that play sports, but I'll make one right now that'll play sports. If you want to pay him $5 million to come be a pitcher on a softball team, and it worked. I mean, they got to the national championship game in softball. They got arguably the biggest pass rusher that went into the April portal in David Bailey away from Stanford. So at the end of the day, where I said, where it's Big Ten, ACC, SEC, nobody cares about the division. It's who's got the deepest wallets. And right now, Texas Tech doesn't seem to have any kind of depth to their wallet. It's like an endless stream of money.
There's supposed to be a limit on NIL money, and they're going to have these realistic deals. You're out there in the world of recruiting. Do you think there's any chance that happens? It either there's a court challenge and that stuff's just all blown away and we just stay in the Wild West, or it goes underground, sort of, the way it has been for decades until NIL opened it up. Aren't those the two options?
Yeah, I mean, I miss the phrase "the bagman" because everything is out there right now. I mean, bring back the innocent days of college football with the bagman and duffel bags of cash. Except now, they're prepaid Visa check cards, and that's where the money is. But no, I think we're in a litigant society that all they're going to do is just keep suing. And what we're seeing is the NCAA is taking loss after loss in court. And so, as long as you got lawsuits, you have to keep paying for the legal counsel. You might as well just throw your hands up and just say, you know what, NIL go is not working. I mean, who comes up with the arbitrary number of $600? And those are the deals. Now, the reality is everybody thinks every kid is getting paid billions of dollars, not millions of dollars to go there. The reality is, even with revenue sharing, it's still going to the top 1% to 5%, just like the NFL. You have minimum contracts in the NFL, the veteran contracts, the rookie contracts, but the elite players are controlling the large amount of the salary cap numbers, and that's going to be the same in college. So you're going to have schools that are going to be like, hey, from a revenue sharing standpoint, we've got to give our quarterback and our left tackle more money, but you also need 22 guys, 22 starters, 85 guys, or I guess 105 guys now on the roster to compete. So you're going to have some sweetheart backyard or backdoor deals to keep those other players who will get unhappy when I'm the one catching on these passes from the quarterback. Why is he making so much more money than I am?
Okay, so we understand how Texas Tech would be doing it. You just said about the oil money, but then you lavish praise on the Sun Devils, and I'm a Sun Devil alum, so that's great to hear. But I'm wondering, how are they doing it then if they don't have that type of money?
Well, that's the thing with ASU is that they're doing it, but if you notice, they're not really getting star power. So there is still going to be a place in college football for really well-coached teams with a lot of culture, with a good camaraderie, good chemistry to be competitive. Are they going to win the national championship? Probably not. Is a Boise State going to win a national championship? Probably not. They spent, I think, 80% of their NIL money went to keeping Ashton Genty last year. But if you have a culture and one or two star players that are willing to say, hey, I'll get it on the back end, whether it's being developed into a first-round draft pick, I'll win that way. And, now that everybody's going to have the $15 to $20 million to share in revenue from the media rights deals, that's how they're doing it. When you sell Tempe, Arizona, and I get that. My son goes to Arizona State. I can understand why that's appealing and attractive. Lubbock's going to catch some strays here. So if you're Lubbock, what are you going to do to entice these kids to come to Lubbock, Texas, that went to modern day high school and just spent 3 years getting their degree at Stanford? You're going to sell them on what we can put in your wallet rather than the beautiful country scene that Lubbock has. And with all due respect to Texas Tech, you've got to have incentives. And so I think there are some schools where I'm getting developed. We talked about it for years with the Alabama, quote-unquote, Alabama discount under Nick Saban. Guys would take less money because they knew if they got developed by Nick Saban, there's a good chance they're sitting in the green room come April. And I think with some schools, there's like, hey, come here. We're a pro-style program. We're going to get you developed. We're going to get you drafted. Play the long game, not the short game. And when you get those players, there still are plenty of guys that just want to play college football because they love college football. If you can get a little bit of extra scratch, all the better. But the goal is the NFL. So I want to go somewhere I could potentially win rather than pull a Florida State where it's all about money and you go 2-10 a year after you thought you should have been in the playoff.
We'll leave it right there for now, Brandon. We appreciate your time, your perspective, your knowledge on all things recruiting. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Brandon Huffman, National Recruiting Editor for 24/7 Sports. Lubbock, Texas, catching strays. Well, we can put stuff in your wallet.